Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. We're very happy to see you back again. Welcome to our today's QM Convo, the webcast and live stream where we delve into the latest trends in CRM and enterprise technology. Today, we are continuing our ongoing debate of generative AI with Jon Reed and Dr. Michael Wu, which I welcome with a great pleasure again on our show. This time we are focusing on the critical question of ROI. Is generative AI truly delivering tangible value, or is it still more hype than substance? Others are talking about a bubble, and we would like to go for this deep dive. We're thrilled to go into more detail and to welcome back our two experts who've been instrumental in shaping our understanding of AI's potential and challenges. These are Dr. Michael Wu, a seasonal AI strategist and thought leader. Michael brings a wealth of experience from his roles at prominent companies like Brot and Lithium. He's passionate about the potential of AI to transform businesses and drive innovation. And Jon Reed, a renowned analyst and Diginomica co-founder. Jon has been covering enterprise tech for over 2 decades, with a focus on the intersection of technology and businesses value. Jon offers a pragmatic perspective on the real world's impact of AI. Gentlemen, welcome back again to the show. I could intune welcome back Cotter, but that wouldn't be true. So we are really, really happy to have you back. And as it's the fourth installment of our AI debate, let's go right into it. So I hand over to Thomas, who was so kind to prepare some of the sheet and ask the first question.
Oh my God. Since then, are you polite?
Oh, well, you don't recognize it, but I am.
Well, let's look at the overall part. So most vendors are still promoting things that are really exciting, like summarize an opportunity, give me a case summary, an account summary. So this is kind of yawning, so boring, inspiring even. So, and what do you think is that causing? Is that the end of it? Will generative AI, will open AI or Gemini as the Google variety, will they experience their metaverse moment soon and just vanish in oblivion? So what do you think, Michael? Let's start with you.
Sure, I could comment on that. I think the large amount of generative AI, whether it is in the text domain or image, music, audio, video, or even other domain, highly specific domains such as protein structures, or I think their main kind of, I would say, function is to help kind of human in this creative process, this generative process, right? I mean, and so it is very often the case that used to be a very time-consuming process, like writing a blog or coming up with a design, or of a new drug, a new molecule, or something like that. But they could just be generated now. So I think in essence that they are a productivity boost for sure, right? And I think that's actually why a lot of, I think earlier is was mentioned that many many companies are, are reluctant to kind of say ROI, to claim ROI, any ROI on generative AI, because these productivity, right, they accumulate over time, right? So the ROI is not really noticeable right away, right? I mean, you will see some productivity gain, but the ROI will come like after, if one company is like operates, I don't know, say 5% more efficient than another company, right? You're not going to see the significant difference until you're maybe, years later, so that's the main thing. So I think it's not really hitting that metaverse moment. I feel like it's just more like, we have to be patient with this type of technology because the primary mechanism of these type of AI is essentially to improve efficiency, and efficiency, accumulates over time, right? I mean, if one company can claim that they operate, even just 1% more efficient than another, right? I mean, if you accumulate that over like a 10-year or, 30-year or 50-year, then that is very huge, like accumulation over time.
John, you are nodding.
Yes. Well, a dirty little secret of the AI debates is that Michael and I really don't disagree fundamentally on all that much. In fact, I wish there were many more practitioners that approach this subject with Michael's sensibilities in this field. It would be good for the enterprise. So, but we always find stuff to get worked up about because I can get triggered by these discussions easily. But in the background here, what we have is we have a so-called AI bubble and a market reaction. And then we also have the notable enforcement of the EU AI Act that started on August 1st. I think these are both very significant developments. Michael's right about the being patient with AI fundamentally. The problem is how much are the markets going to put up with that given how overcapitalized some of this stuff is, and what is going to be the fallout from that economically. Because if we give generative AI and AI in general enough time, I do think it will largely deliver for companies. One thing to remember, Thomas, is that if you save time on a process, that doesn't necessarily sound all that sexy, but a lot of it has to do with what you do with the humans whose time is being saved. And that's a fundamental work philosophy issue. Unfortunately, the predominant thing I'm seeing is let's justify this into a headcount reduction, and basically everyone works harder and harder until they grind into dust. And that's a very uninspired use of AI, in my opinion, and a very detrimental use. But if you shift the humans into higher impact roles and activities, that's part of it. But the reason I feel a little vindicated on the ROI thing is because I've been saying for a long time that ROI is going to be tough with this technology because it does require human supervision in many cases, which makes it difficult to scale, and it's expensive, and we can get into details on both those things. And there's ways of modifying both of those things, but it makes ROI a challenge. But Michael's totally right. This is not metaverse or blockchain. This is a real thing. It just needs more time than the markets want to give it right now.
Yeah, I think one example that I could give, is in Cogen. Right? I think people are using Copilot, and especially, my team, a lot of engineers around the world are using Copilot to help them write code more efficiently, right? So the predominant notion is that, like, if you free up people's time from doing the mundane stuff such as commenting, writing documentation, right, they will use those time to actually do I would say activity that are that would drive revenue, drive business growth, or something like that, right? But typically that's actually not what's been observed, right? If you have an engineer, he writes code like, say, twice as fast, right? He has 50% of his time kind of free up. What do you think he's going to do? What do you think he will do or want to do, right? He's just going to write more code, right? Why he's not going to go drive more sales or do more marketing or drive more interest in the thing. I mean, he's just going to end up doing. I mean, just the reality of it. We claim that a lot of people, in theory, people can use those time to do something different that will drive business in a more effective, my business grows in a more effective way. But a lot of cases, people just don't. People may not know how. People may not want to. People may not, so there are a lot of things. I think the structure of the business as it is today doesn't really enable people to make use of those free up time very effectively, other than just doing more of what they have been doing. So that's long. Yeah.
As you mentioned, patience. Sorry, I was getting impatient because the thunderstorm just gave me a break. How long do we have to be patient? Because the investors lost to a certain degree their patience. What is your take on that?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to speak for the market, right? And the investors. I mean, I'm a very patient person. I'm happy to wait, right, and see. But I mean, I'm not going to speak for them. But I mean, I think that there are, I mean, a better way, to kind of invest in these type of technology, AI. I mean, I think generative AI is the buzz today, right? But like I said, there actually are, traditional analytic AI, right? These are AI that's been around for, I don't know, 50, 60, actually almost 70 years now. And some of those are can drive revenue and profit a lot more effectively. So I think a good way to do is not to just focus on generative AI, but you have a balance of approach, right? You have one that kind of AI that actually helps drive revenue, in a much shorter time scale, right? Where the dominant mechanism of ROI is through it's not through productivity gain or efficiency, right? Because like I said before, right, those takes time to accumulate, right? But there are AI that actually drive profitability, right? So you can actually use that in conjunction with generative AI, and then you prove your. Actually, you can even start with that type of AI, right, to drive profitability, and then use the gain from those to fund your longer term generative AI effort. So there are just is a strategy that you could I think, unfortunately, I think right now the hype is around generative AI, so a lot of people focus on that, but there can be a better approach. Yeah.
John, you just said inspired use of generative AI, which is what is probably currently not done, because it's always the argumentation of automation and automating human labor away, which gets translated by businesses, justifiably so, more efficiency, less people, less cost, more profitability, to quote, to get into Michael's direction there. So what would you consider a more inspired usage then?
Yeah, thanks for the easy question.
Yeah, well, some low balls sometimes.
So look, investors are just going to have to take their lumps and wait on this, because it's not going to happen, Ralph, in the time frame that investors want. Sorry, they're just too short term. But Thomas, I understand why the enterprise is starting with more conservative use cases.
Sure.
And we're just going to have to put up with that for a while, because there's a couple things that need to happen. First of all, they have to overcome some of the cautions around how this is going to be deployed, customer data, privacy issues, sorting things out with vendors in terms of IP-related issues. There's all kinds of stuff there. One of the best things about AI and generative AI is that it's forced an AI readiness conversation, which I wrote about as part of my big projects post you can check out on Diginomica. It's like ridiculously long, but a big part of it is like you need quality data sources to get, you talk about imagination. Well, you're going to need quality data as part of that imaginative process in the enterprise context. But I think that's why a lot of times you see the most creative and interesting uses of generative AI outside the enterprise, because outside the enterprise, you're free from issues of compliance and regulation and scale, and you can just try cool shit. And when you try cool shit with these tools, it turns out it can do some pretty cool stuff. Unfortunately, the killer apps outside the enterprise setting and the consumer setting are mostly pretty terrifying. Things like disinformation at scale, deep fakes, spinning up fake websites, destroying SEO, which has been happening, creating fake content on social platforms that people think is real. So a lot of the killer apps don't translate well, but there's also a lot of people doing super cool stuff with these tools. I mean, I was just telling you guys before we started that I was helping a friend of mine rethink his whole career planning using these tools, and he's honestly been really stuck. And he challenged ChatGPT to say, show me these 10 job titles that I would qualify for. But the catch was he had done a bunch of hard work detailing his skills profile that he could feed into the system. And this is the thing you always have to keep in mind, is that when you have good data, then you can really set it free and figure out what to do with that data. And I think that's where it gets exciting, honestly.
Yeah, but the challenge is not the usage side. I think the problem is the vendor side. They are actively selling what I would call it, well, I said yawning, boring stuff. Summarize me an opportunity. Well, or give me an account brief. This is stuff that is there. about. Yeah. So why put an expensive tool like a generative AI, a derivative AI in that case, on it to provide me a summary? So why aren't the vendors looking at more exciting stuff? Or
Well,
are they and just not talking about
Well,
it?
Michael,
those are
Michael,
just low-hanging
Mike,
fruit.
well, Michael works for vendors, so he's now in the hot seat.
That's
Well, I mean, I
another
think
show.
those are low-hanging fruits, right? I mean, for
Yeah.
any vendor, I mean,
Yeah.
you want to put stuff out fast, and you want to, that to show that you're adopting the latest and greatest technology, right? So you gain the kind of the mind share in the conversation, in the market,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
I think as a result, people put out stuff that are kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? So
Which
that's that's
is
kind
fair.
of, yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean that there can't be more innovation later, right? I mean, you putting out these things out there to, yeah, I think so. So I think that I would say that a lot of the generative AI tools from vendors today, they're very focused on, I would say, helping kind of almost like individual work. They help individuals to be more productive. And
Yeah.
however, the way that most enterprise or organizations are organized, we organize in team, we collaborate, we there's not very many of those generative AI where it actually facilitate the collaboration. I think that one very cool, I mean, good use case is to make these collaboration between team members much more effective. Build trust, build these type of synergy. And build this communication. So I think teams are interesting in a way that it has its own dynamic, right? Every team is different, even though you have people with exactly the same skill, right? The dynamics of the team can be very different because they just the chemistry, the way that people's expectations for each other, the trust level, the way they communicate, it can be all different, right? But if you have this AI that can actually help these team members, build a stronger team, right? I think that would be a really, really cool thing. But I don't think that's much more complex, right? I mean, if you think about any generative AI tool that's out there today, it typically have one person or two person, kind of like either the person is directly working with the other person, right? So you help, I answer your question or you answer my, or back a little bit of that back and forth. It doesn't work in a team setting. It doesn't actually help any team kind of building, right? I think if there is a way to enable these AI to facilitate communication to where you can build trust, right, and maybe even showcase, your team member. I mean, I think teams are weird in the sense that there are a lot of things, people's kind of feeling, emotion, just because we have some similar background, I work with you better. I don't have similar background as you, so I don't trust you as much. So it's a lot of things but AI can actually facilitate a lot of that, right? If you just communicate with a person, but sometimes you may not want to communicate with a person because you felt there's some communication barrier. So there's a lot of things that AI could augment there, and I think that would be a much more fruitful, but also very much more challenging, right? So I don't think there's a killer app out there. I think there is more like a killer system, right? Because different people within the organization work with different system, right? And right now, the system needs to kind of talk to each other. I think the most common way that we kind of communicate with each other is through like team or email or something like that, right? Or some other chat room type of capability. But I think in the future, this AI can be that connective tissue between the organization, between the team.
Which actually goes into the direction of whether there is a need for a killer app or a killer system or not, in order to get away from what we both call low-hanging fruit. I mean, we are 2 years in. And just was it in June? Early June, a vendor proudly told me that they are now doing op summaries for $20 a seat a month. Heck, this is probably a bit late, and not necessarily sufficient. So isn't it time to change that narrative to value, to more value?
I think it is changing to some extent, Thomas. Like I think you're giving a little bit of short shrift, in my opinion, to vendors that are digging into industry problems. So, for example, I get briefings from vendors that are working on things like predictive maintenance and plant scheduling and solving really difficult problems in that context.
Yeah.
Michael referred to
Yeah,
medical.
but keep in mind, those are not generative AI usually, right? Those
But they
predictive
are. That's what's interesting. It's a combination of the two. And you're right. And to some extent, they're not always, right? And that's fine too, right? Like sometimes solving problems, as you pointed out, with non AI, but they're finding ways of using AI agents to accelerate some of those processes and to speed scenarios and engagement and things like that. And, so I think some of these industry-based applications are really interesting. So talking to a finance vendor about building an industry LLM for finance for their finance users. If you don't think that's sexy, then you're in the wrong line of work. I mean, this is what the enterprise is for, is solving difficult industry problems for people. And if generative AI can help with that, I think that's very, very important. Now, having said that, I think you're totally right that most of the stuff we've heard from vendors is pretty boring. And the other thing that I'm a little frustrated by is that in the fall, I think what we're going to hear a lot about is how AI agents are the next big thing, and essentially, trying to seduce customers into waiting another period of time for whatever great thing's going to come along to actually make this great, instead of actually like showcasing what's actually being done. Because I'm sorry, but if you're able to save 20% of your support costs by smartly deploying good chatbots, not shitty chatbots, but good ones, that's sexy. And if you're able to improve your predictive planning by 1% or even 0.5%, to some companies that's massive. And so start showing us that, and quit kicking the can down the road with, wait until you have agents, then everything's going to be awesome. And I'm really worried that that's what we're going to hear all fall, instead of really digging into how customers are solving problems now.
And that's where I want to get into as well. You said something like LLM for finance. So that sounds to me like an MBA in marketing, which is specialization again. An MBA is supposed to be something general, and an LLM is something general. In order to harvest value for buyers, the users, not necessarily for the vendors. Well, they harvest anyways. Probably not, but well, they want to. But for the buyers to harvest value, doesn't it need more specialization, more orchestration of models of different sizes and specialties?
Short answer, no, but I'll let Michael answer.
Well, I would beg the other. I would say the other. I don't think there was an all a no. I think that there is a need for specialization. I think that is the nature of the fact that we humans, we have a finite kind of capacity. We can't learn everything that's out there, right? I mean, in the back, I don't know. I would say back, I don't know, maybe 50 years ago, there is maybe a computer guy who does everything related to computer, right? But now IT has evolved into so many disciplines, right? There's office IT, there's security, there's infrastructure, there's a whole lot. I mean, people specialize because we just can't keep up with the latest and greatest in every aspect, right? So I think that would be similar in the case of with AI. And I think for a lot of these specialization, right, I think is still needed to deliver kind of value. If you just have a generic thing, right, it will solve, I would say, 80% of the problem, right? But it doesn't bring you that last mile, right? And if it doesn't completely solve your problem, it's not, consumer won't get any value from it, right? If you solve it doesn't help me to solve my problem 80% of the time. You have to solve my problem done completely, right? Kind of in order for me to get any value from that, right? So I think there will be some specialization, right? But then that's kind of like where a lot of these traditional analytics AI versus generative AI, right? I mean, I think, John has mentioned that before, right? I mean, a lot of this predictive maintenance or predictive planning, right? So a lot of those are actually not done using generative AI as a core. They actually, generative AI is simply a kind of this user kind of interface, right? Almost like a UI layer that actually calls those specialized algorithm, right? And retrieve the results and then summarize it in a human way, right? Think of this generative AI as kind of a translator kind of between these very highly sophisticated algorithm that's highly specialized, right? And then they can actually take the results back and then summarize it and present it to you in a very consumable kind of piece of text, a paragraph or something like that, right? So I think that's where you need this kind of collaboration between the analytic AI and generative AI, right? Because generative AI makes it easier to access these highly sophisticated algorithms that traditionally you need very specialized skill to interpret the result, to understand what it means. But now you have this generative AI able to translate that to you, right? So I think that's you need both. Yeah.
Embrace this, and would like to go back to that little word where you said the numbers which show you there is the benefit, and then when you generate an extra value, an extra benefit, then you can go and collect some numbers which at least give you a little in that ROI discussion, such as for that job in this specific usage we made some extra money, or we saved so and so much time, or we delivered a better experience after we questioned the customer how he felt the utilization of that smart chatbot. Do we have more of these?
I didn't quite, is that a question or is that just a comment?
That was a comment, and at the end a question.
Yeah,
Such as, I want to hear more about these things where you say, if it's generative or built-in or predictive or machine learning, when you see a benefit, we come into the benefit talk, then it has a story to tell. And I would like to hear some more of these from you observed good stories. Like
So
coding.
on Diginomica, we've been working to document these use cases, and for the most part, we don't have very many live production examples, but there we have documented some. We documented a law firm that had achieved a significant improvement in documenting legal briefings and such, and they had, of course, had human supervision at the right times, but they had actually, in some cases, had better results from that system generating content than some of their humans. I've documented a couple of support-related things where the chatbot was deployed properly and restrained properly so as not to do stupid stuff. But for the most part, we're not hearing a whole lot of that. Now, there are customers and pilots right now, and it will be up to the vendors and the customers how much they're willing to showcase that in the fall timeframe. I just interviewed a vendor that does industrial generative AI, and to Michael's point, they use also classic AI, but they do use generative stuff for more than just a front-end bot interface. They use it to generate different kinds of scheduling scenarios and stuff like that. And they're having really good impact. They have it's Zapata AI. They have a good use case with BMW where they solved a lot of scheduling issues and improved performance on existing systems. And so the question I was asking them is like, well, when can I talk to your customers? And of course, the catch there is that for some of these more interesting use cases, the customers are going to be a little careful because they don't necessarily want to give away their secret sauce. So that's the challenge there, because a customer might come to you and say, oh, I'll tell you how Copilot helped this division or whatever, but they're not going to tell you how they were able to improve on some core operational secret because they don't want that out yet. And so part of the challenge is we have to pull those stories out. But I think that's going to be a crucial distinction this fall. How much are we going to see vendors sharing early use case successes versus how much are they going to kick the can down the road? And to be honest with you, I do like some things about agents. There's some really cool things you can do with agents. I just am wary of always pushing the hype machine to the next thing as opposed to documenting the things that are actually doable now.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that you should never wait until the next great thing, because you could wait forever, because there will always be greater thing that comes.
Yeah.
Right? And then the key thing is to start now. And literally, with generative AI, you could start anywhere. I just to give you some more of these stories, right? I mean, I think, certainly we are building generative AI into our product, right? In our product suite. But even beyond that, right, a company can actually make your own operation much more effectively by leveraging generative AI in a creative way, right? So for one example, like our legal teams are using generative AI to answer people's legal questions, right? I mean, lawyers are expensive, right? So think about, do you want your lawyers spend most of their time answering, sales questions, anything that concerns legal, right? If you answer it once, you could just, create a document that answers that type of question, and then that becomes part of your document repository that fuels your RAG, right? And then will actually answer anybody's future question related to this topic, right? So basically, our legal team have seen significant kind of productivity gain, right? Again, we don't know how much in terms of actual dollar does that save in terms of yet, right? But certainly we could see that productivity gain. But we strongly believe that over time this will translate to very significant kind of competitive advantage, because we can operate much more efficiently, right? And we can another there's actually more on the data side, right? I would say that these are rather technical. When we, pros does like pricing, right? So and revenue management. So we very often we do have to ingest, data from customer, right? Their transaction data, their product data, and their customer data, right? And very often these data are ingested from their system. Every industry have probably 2 or 3 system of record for customer or for product, right, and for transaction, and and we cover probably, I think last I looked, we cover 42 different industry, everything from airline to manufacturer, distributor, oil and gas, chemical, food process, you name it, because the truth is, every industry have some product and services that they need to sell, and they need to put a price tag on those product or services, right? And that price on the price tag is optimized, and that's the problem that we solve, right? And to solve that problem, we need to ingest a lot of data from the customer. So very often, we have some core algorithm that need to understand what those customer data field means, right? I mean, SAP may call their field something. What SAP actually uses a very encrypted kind of ID to encode each field, right? Whereas other vendor may have different names, right? How do you actually consolidate all those different systems, right? So we are using a generative AI to actually help us interpret. If a human could look at this, this looked like a company name. This field looks like a company address. This looks like a zip code. This looks like a phone number. So we could do that, right? So the perfect thing is to just ask the generative AI, what do you think this field is, right? And it can actually answer that very reliably and map that actual correct field, right? So that mapping exercise between the customer and us typically takes like back and forth, several rounds of back and forth of validation and everything. But now it's reduced the time significantly, right? So we can just in a much more automated fashion, right? So save tremendous amount of time, right? But it's operational, like it's operational kind of within the company. It's really, I don't want to talk too much about product here. We're not here to sell anything, but
no trade secrets here.
I hate to narrow the focus, but when we brought up the example of legal advice from AI, that made me think. When one is talking about legal stuff to others, you generally have to disclaim whether it does or does not constitute legal advice coming from a lawyer. How would AI agents stand up to that? I mean, what level does it fill if you get information from a law bot or a tax bot.
Mhm.
You can take that information right. You can take that information right to court if you want, and you can wind up in the newspaper. That's already happened.
Yeah, true.
But no, it's a really good question, though.
And the key thing is to reference sources, right? So basically, the generative AI response will constitute kind of the first, okay, you ask a question, this is the response, and this is where I got this response from, right? Please reference this for more detail, right? And then to validate it, and then so the salesperson typically, a lot of the questions, I would say, within the organization tend to be repeat questions. They're, like a lot, for example, a lot of the customer questions are, where do I send an email to get a quote, or where do I get who do I talk to get this part or something like that, right? So it's a very simple question, like what address should I send this to or something. So these are just very easy, right? You could say, okay, this is it will just show you this is the address, and then show that this is where I get this address from. You could go take a look. I mean, but it's usually not that difficult, right? And the one that are more challenging, of course, you need to maybe look at the answer and look at the reference document. You can actually click on it and actually look at the source document, right? And understand how the lawyer answered that question, in what context does it actually, right? So, but again, there's always this disclaimer, right? That this is, generated from, we're never going to actually completely, use your judgment, right? I mean, if you're still not sure, there's nobody preventing you from pinging the lawyer, saying, what do you mean this? Like, I want to make sure, like you can. You can do it, but in most cases, a lot of these questions, you look at it and you just say, okay, that's obvious, right? That's the right answer. I'm not gonna bother my legal team to slow them down, or
so you can stick it into your knowledge management system and be done.
Thomas, can I get in real quick on this, or before we, or do you have something you want to? Looks like you're about to say something.
Thomas is always about
Marshall.
I have always some wrenches to throw, but let's go ahead with you.
So, Marshall, I think you got to a core point, which is AI systems design is totally important, no matter what area. And you can handle this in legal if you design it properly. It's just like anything else, and that includes the appropriate disclaimers and all of that. Like, because the person giving that advice isn't a lawyer to begin with, whether they're getting the tool for generative AI or not. So the appropriate disclaimers have to be in place. And it is important to keep in mind that when lawyers took this to court and got in trouble, they actually took cited material from the system to case laws and cases that didn't actually exist in the real world. And so a key part of this is honing this with customer data and industry specific data, and making sure that your generative AI system is accountable to that. And Thomas, you asked the question about this general, like, why can't we use this more generally? Well, it's not good enough. It's crap for that. Look at it on the consumer side with Gemini and your exploits there. Like, general purpose language models are incredibly expensive and deeply inaccurate. And in the enterprise context, you simply, at this point in time, cannot do that. You need more specialized systems. But the beauty of it is the more specialized systems are more accurate, more affordable, because a lot of times they're not even using large language models. They're using smaller models, or they might not be even using generative technology at all. There was a really important study that came out in the last couple of weeks called Power Hungry Processing: What's Driving the Cost of AI Deployment? And it was done by a few different folks, including someone from Hugging Face. But one of the key findings, and this is something that came up in our past episode, the costs are not just about training. Anytime you generate information, there's an energy cost to that. And what they found is that they juxtapose what they called, they take search as an example. Extractive technology is the classic search of extracting from a deep learning system a particular answer. To generate that answer consumes 30 times more power than extracting it. That doesn't mean you would never have a generative answer, but it means that you need to really take these things into account when you deploy systems and make smart choices. And this fantasy of just having this whole generalized super intelligence hovering over the enterprise doesn't work. But I love, not at this point in time. Someday it will. But what I really like is Michael's point, which is like, why don't we focus on using this as the glue in between teams and making us work better? Instead of like, oh, this wrote this shitty blog post for me. Like, stop writing crappy blog posts with this tool and start thinking about how it can make your whole team work better and bring out your team's talents. Coding's different because coding has syntax, and generative AI is really good at that. But, you know, and generative AI is good for like writing help documentation. Don't get me wrong. But quit fantasizing and getting excited about, oh, this is going to help me with my creativity, and maybe help your team work better. That I love that as a premise for AI in general.
I think that is kind of the thing that I feel like, you know, will be the kind of the next evolution. Like I said, most of the generative AI today, right, focuses on, you know, individual productivity gain. Right? It helps you do something, whether it's writing a blog, creating a molecule, generating an image, creating a design, or something. It helps you do your work. One person typically, you know, at most probably 2%, right? Kind of at least on a one-to-one basis, right? It doesn't, you know, have this where I see the most benefit, you know, this generative AI can actually drive, you know, where it doesn't actually turns into this just a replacement of people, right? I think if it help you do better, then of course, you know, if you just one person, right? And I used to need 5 of you, now I just need like, you know, 4 or 3, right? I mean, maybe I still keep 5 of you, but I just don't hire more in the future, right? I just 5 of you could actually sustain me the next 10 years instead of the next 5 years as my company grow, right? So that's, you know, a way to use these generative AI in a way that I would say align with kind of the human value, right? And not just, you know, become a kind of a cost saving and therefore replacement or displacement of human roles, human jobs.
Michael, just real quick.
That is not much talked about, isn't it?
No, they haven't. And just real quick, and then over you, Thomas. Michael, in the last discussion I had on this came to me, this notion of AI is the organizational glue. And I really like that notion of helping teams get stickier in really cool ways that weren't possible before. I love that vision for it. Sorry, Thomas.
Yeah, so that I actually, shameless plug, know only one company that talks about team collaboration. They're basically working on a collaboration room supported by generative AI, which is coming from the conversational side. I only know actually one company talking about it, but then hey, my knowledge is kind of limited as well. But back to the original.
I mean, it's something that I would say that it's a natural kind of next stage, right? I mean, it helps individual, but you know, and most tools initially started out helping individual, but then when it comes to, you know, team and, you know, then it's no longer a kind of a killer app, like I said before. It's a system. It's a big system, right? I mean, you have your CRM, you have your ERP, multiple roles, multiple people, you know, from different role, different organization use those systems, right? So that's where the complexity comes in, and I think that's, you know, as vendors start to move away from these low-hanging fruits, right? These are the problem that they will start to solve next, kind of the natural, because these are the more complex questions.
Yeah, and these low-hanging fruit actually are my peeve, because I mean, it's 2 years after, right? And we are still talking about them, and mostly talking about them with the caveat of what Jon said before. So what is really high value, it might be a trade secret of mine, so I don't talk about it at all. So it's actually quite a good point. But I got 3 things that get me a little bit around. So I do actually think that agents are not the next best thing, but they're already pretty much there and pretty high value as well in terms of providing good service. In the spring season, I got presented quite a good use case from that, using a combination of different AIs, admittedly. Part 1. Part 2, based upon what you just said, Michael, isn't another high value of generative AI not in the field of explainability? I mean, we have all those analytical models that say this is the next step you should take. And my usual question I would have had to you if you told me that first, why? What brings you to that conclusion? Yeah. So which an AI can't do.
Well, generative AI can definitely help with
Yeah,
explainability.
yeah.
Right? I mean, you could actually, I mean, very often it is, we if you apply some complex machine learning or AI algorithm to a problem, or whether it is, as complex as network planning or demand forecasting for something like that, so these are, in the realm of a data scientist, right? We have to look at the result, look at the input, look at the, the model, right? And kind of to interpret what the result actually means, right? I mean, but now I think, having all these numbers and stuff that right there, right? You could give it to an AI. The AI can actually help you understand what those mean, right? I mean, so it becomes kind of more accessible. I think generative AI can become this. The way I always talk about this, generative AI is like the graphical user interface for the computer, right? Before you have graphical user interface, people have to like type command lines, right, to do everything, right? I mean, but having graphical user interface enables kind of pretty much anyone to use a computer, right?
Yeah.
And this generative AI is very much in a similar vein, right? It used to be you need data scientists or data engineer or some pretty sophisticated, some domain knowledge or technical domain knowledge in some area to use whatever algorithm they need to use. But with generative AI, I think you can actually access those without that much technical expertise. I think so. I kind of equate that to the graphical user interface for computer, right? But generative AI is
Next
like
level,
that
yeah.
for kind of these advanced analytic algorithms, right? Something like that, right? So, I think that not only can it actually explain to you what the results are, you can actually tell you, things about the data, things about the data, things about the model, right? When this model is typically applicable, it could tell you a lot of things, right? I mean, you may not be able to do it yourself, but it can actually tell you in a way that you can understand so you can make judgment about whether to trust the conclusion or how much you should trust it, and so on, right?
So Michael and I disagree a little bit on explainability, but it's not a big issue because I think ultimately explainability is a shorthand for trust, and what this system is really about is earning the trust of users. And if the system does the right thing, even if it doesn't tell you exactly why, you don't need to explain it everything anyway. Like for example, my GPS, I don't need it to tell me exactly why it told me to go one direction, not another. I just need it to not drive me into the river or into a traffic jam. If it demonstrates that it's going to take me to the right place, I don't need explanations as to how it arrived at the algorithm that it did.
So, okay, that's after you have established trust to the GPS.
Right. Yeah. But explainability was never a factor there. I never needed explainability to get to trust. Now, I'm not saying that explainability is a bad thing; it's a good thing. But the thing I would challenge Thomas on is that agents are not at all like here and now in general. I mean, they're incredibly useful for automating subroutines on a technical level and connecting the dots between different AI services and things like that. So I'm not going to deny that, but people are overhyping this to a massive degree. And I was combing through a developer forum on this, and this guy was like, and then I saw an article where he was like, yeah, I asked my agent to deliver my DoorDash and, delivered to, a different location than where I was currently at. So it delivered to the second best location. That's awesome. So, vendors are overhyping oh, we can use this to do all of these actions for us. And it's like, well, until you trust the machine to execute every action correctly, you need to be really careful about removing human supervision. So in fact, there's a whole variety of AI agents. I was just going through a ZDNet post about this. It talked about a whole wide range of agents, from reflex agents to model-based agents to goal-based agents and utility and learning agents, hierarchical agents, which is kind of tying different agents together and doing quality assurance on different. So it's a really, really important conversation because I think there's a lot of power there. Yeah. But I welcome the conversation. I was just using it as one example of the hype that I'm worried about hearing this fall. Sure. Whereas I think customers really want to hear a much more practical discussion, like Michael said in the beginning of this, around how to use all these tools. They don't care whether it's generative or rules based or, you know, simple automation or RPA or analytics. They don't care if it's PowerPoint or you know, whatever, Google Analytics. They just want to get the job done and get a better result. And so show us how these systems are evolving to get results, and then you won't hear nearly as much like acid from me in my posts this fall when we go to all these events.
Looking forward to that acid.
Well, I think it's inevitable that I'm going to have acid because I can see it coming. And part of it is the whole AI is the new UI thing, which is just a load of horse crap. I mean, it will be eventually, but we're nowhere. I don't know about you, but I'm nowhere near the point of trusting an AI interface to handle everything for me. But in a specific context around specific issues, I absolutely will trust it. So it's not that it's not, but it's like this whole. I think Michael's totally right. Like, let's quit obsessing over the killer app, like, oh, the new UI, and let's focus on building killer systems that support human work better. And then we're going to have a much better experience with AI. And as far as Wall Street is concerned, if they don't like that, they're going to have to suck eggs because there's nothing that's going to happen to make it better for them. I'm sorry.
I don't have any problem with replacing the word app with system. To me, they are pretty much synonymous anyways.
Well, then we solved that debate. All right, another debate's over.
Check mark on that one.
Michael, you wanted to say something. Sorry.
I wanted to revisit this notion of trust again, right? I mean, so I think I think that's actually the most important thing that aside from, I would say, the alignment problem, the trust problem and the alignment problem are the two most important problems in, I would say, AI that the AI system have to solve. And I think that you mentioned that for GPS, right? Or any system, I would say that typically, when the system is doing what we expect them to do, right? We typically do not require explanation. Because this is exactly what I would have done, right? I mean, if it tells you to go this, for GPS, right? If it tells you to go your normal route, the way that you go every day, then you would not question it. The problem is when it doesn't, right? So I think a lot of people, at least in the early stage, before the trust has established, right? Before the trust was established yet, right? When the first time they use Waze, they're a little curious. Why does Waze tell me to go in this little tiny alley, that I never go, right? I mean, because they never, that's not that's not their normal route. Normally I just go this straight, freeway, and then that's it. Right? Why did you tell me to go to this little tiny small alley, right? But if the thing is that, like with GPS, it's very easy to develop the trust, right? If you follow the route, you actually get to your destination faster, earlier. You just need a few examples, right? 2 or 3 times, then you start trusting it. Then you don't question. Then you tell you to go to some crazy alley, then you don't care about it because that's after you establish the trust. So I think that John, you don't question explainability from GPS because you already trust it, right? The thing is that what happens,
I think he might misunderstand my position slightly, though. I'm in support of explainability. I just don't think generative AI is very good at explainability. I support it. I just don't think it's very good at it.
Well, generative AI alone.
You probably misunderstand me now. So
I think generative AI alone is not very good at explainability. But if you actually provide the generative AI with all the analytical results from an algorithm, right, and ask it to explain to the human what that means, right? Before you're looking at a bunch of a table with a bunch of numbers with some bunch of confidence intervals.
Yes. If you're making the case that it can democratize information access and analytics, then yes, I agree with that. We are on the same page there.
And I just wanted to clarify that that's generative AI alone probably cannot do anything well because it's so general, right? I mean, it cannot even answer a question well because it hallucinates, right? It needs to be augmented with information retrieval or search engine to do this RAG or to do graph RAG or this other system to augment it in order to do well in those systems, in those use cases, right?
So damn it, Michael, we agree again. We agree again. What kind of debate is this?
We need to change the title of this thing.
What kind of debate is this? And by the way, just real quick, I would really encourage anyone who's interested in this topic to look at all the YouTube content and more on RAG and knowledge graphs. There's some super interesting stuff on alternatives to vectorized RAG around knowledge graphs and showing relationships between data points. And this is all about making generative AI better for the enterprise. So there's a lot of good stuff happening in that arena, Thomas, in terms of like looking for cool stuff. I would really recommend looking at that. It might not totally get you excited because it's not your killer app, but it's really cool stuff people are working on.
Well, that's
I just say stop
my
looking
killer
for
app might not be Michael's
It's going to
or
be
yours.
a killer system
Yeah.
with a bunch of components. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't. Yeah, if it's just one app, it's just going to help one person, and it's never.
But Thomas already said that systems and apps are synonymous for him, so I think we solved that one too. So we've eradicated all debate. There's no more debate left. The debate's over.
There surely is. For example, starting with agents, where we might have a different notion as well. I think my notion of an agent is far smaller than yours. I'm
using it based on how vendors have propagandized it.
Yeah,
Not you're defining it how you define it. I'm defining it how I've been hearing it from the keynote stage.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think bottom line with agent is that, like, you know, at the end of the day, you need to trust the agent, right? Agent by definition is taking actions or decisions on your behalf, right? So you have to trust that, right? And how does it actually gain that trust from you? That is the key, right? So either you have 100%. To somehow, you know, the agent initially will not have all the knowledge of like you, right? He has to learn, like, okay, you know, to have a deliver to some address, right? He needs to know where my second favorite address is. Somehow you need to get that information. Sorry, clearing my throat. So somehow you need to get that information to the agent, right? And you have to, you know, trusting it to execute, you know, this action or decision reliably is one thing, right? Trust it enough to give them all the information that you have, right? For a lot of these agents, right? I mean, to execute actions on your behalf, it needs to have access to a lot of your private. You need to have your. I mean, for example, if you wanted your agent to kind of do trade on Wall Street for you, then it needs to have your bank account. It needs to have your investment account. It needs to have all that information. Do you trust the agent to give that information to him, right? So that you can actually trade on your behalf. Do you trust the agent enough to give you an entire medical history so that you can actually, you know, maybe help you find the best doctor, right? So that's the key question, right? So that's why that trust is really, really crucial, right? And I think explainability is one way to achieve that trust, not the only way, but and generative AI can help with that if it's actually provided with, you know, like I said, the input outputs of the algorithm or whatever, right? So
we are sort of closing the hour, sort of.
Sort of. Yeah.
Thomas, did we miss anything from your show notes?
Oh, well, we need to do take 5. Even though there's not too much
Jon,
agreement.
I know you're very passionate about, you know, disinformation and deepfakes and all this stuff, and I think we didn't cover that at all. And I think one recent news I heard is that, like, OpenAI has actually indeed developed some kind of algorithm that where they, you know, the generated content are actually have some watermark in it, you know. So you know, it's not quite clear how they do that or how they kind of prevent, you know, people from slightly modifying the output to kind of, you know, botch that watermark, right? I mean, so it's interesting, but I think, you know, like I said, you know, it's a natural kind of consequence of having innovation, right? Any innovation can be used for good or evil, right? And we just have to, you know, make sure that the good guys have the better algorithm, right? That's always the case, right? I mean, sorry,
Michael, if I interrupt, but the counter says that the hour is approaching fast.
We are running out.
We probably found out that there will not be a Metaverse-Moment anytime soon for generative AI. And having said
but investors are still going to be angry. So
well, it's their problem. And
But there's a better way out,
as-
right? We
as
will
we-
talk about that, right?
As we usually stop with fame or end with famous last words, I'll hand over to Marshall now.
Right. Well, I think that seeing as we are all hoping to start hearing more about ROI from Gen AI implementations, how can businesses ensure that their Gen AI initiatives align with their overall strategic goals and develop long-term value? And how do we get the vendors to tell us about it?
Bingo. I wrote 2 posts about this, but the short version is customers need to take ownership over KPIs and agree upon them, and everyone needs to agree upon how results are going to be measured. But you nailed it. I mean, that's along with trust. I think ownership of what you're doing, and hopefully backed up by an inspired vision of the future of work, not a scary one for employees, is the way to go.
Agreed.
That's too short, Michael.
Yeah, you can have a little more.
Short and simple.
Yep.
I don't have much more to augment, what's been said. So
Well,
Thank
that's
you.
okay. We can always get something for round 5, because you just know we're going to do another one. But that is our convo for today. It was a good one. It was a thick one. We ran a little bit over time, but thank you to Jon Reed and to Dr. Michael Wu for your time and your insight and your entertaining discussion.
My pleasure.
Excuse me. Thanks to our audience for listening in and commenting. It's great to see when that happens. Tune in next week when we will be diving into Salesforce Starter with Chris Billmeyer. That's going to be at a different time, 8 a.m. Pacific instead of the usual 10 a.m. Hopefully you'll be able to join us for that. If not, hey, we record these things. Until then, we thank you and have a great day.
See you.
Take care.
Thank you.